It's great to be in the SEC. Welcome back to another episode of the SEC Recap Podcast. I'm your host, Ben Warren. Had to take a few weeks off, like 2 or 3 weeks off. Had a lot going on in my personal life, work and all that. But I've been around. I've been tweeting. And in fact, I had a tweet get me in a little hot water over the weekend. We're going to talk about all of that on today's episode. I said I would be coming at you with an episode today. Before we get into everything, though, let me just go ahead and say, if you're joining us here on YouTube, thank you for being here. I've seen really nice growth on the YouTube channel this season in the third season of the SEC Recap Podcast, and saw a massive little burst there on the Twitter follows over the weekend. Thank you to Vol Twitter. If any of you guys on Vol Twitter, from Vol Twitter, happen to find your way over here to YouTube, please go ahead and smash that like, smash that thumbs up, smash that subscribe. I'm going to throw a little something your way today. Okay. Man, where to start? So this is Tuesday afternoon. CFP rankings for week 13 are coming out tonight, this evening, I think 7:30 Central Time, somewhere around there. And so I didn't want to wait to get this episode out. I had some time this afternoon. I wanted to go ahead and push it live just to kind of get my thoughts out there, thoughts from the weekend, what I think's going to happen tonight in the CFP rankings. We're pivoting away a little bit, right, from just the power rankings focused model and the efficiency-based stuff that we've been looking at on this podcast for most of the season so far. Guys, if you're not watching on YouTube, if you're just taking this in audio form, I really encourage you today for this episode, for all episodes really, head on over to YouTube or anywhere we can find this podcast in video form. I know YouTube Music will bring you video podcasts. Spotify does the same thing as well. You could find this there, but I'm just going to have some graphics and stuff like that up today that you might find useful, that you might find helpful as we talk through all those things. By the way, quick plugs before we get started. If you haven't checked out the store, head on over to bonfire.com/store/SEC recap. Check out all the great merch that is over there. That will be getting revamped going into the off season. I had a lot of new designs that I couldn't get them all done this year with how busy I was. So I'm going to do a little bit of an overhaul of that going into the 2025 season. Please head over there and check out the stuff. Now, I'll be keeping some of it around. It's not all going away. I'm going to be adding a lot of new stuff, though. So appreciate all of you who have bought T-shirts over there. And then, as always, link will be in the description, but you can donate to the pod through my through the podcast Spotify page. Just a couple bucks. There are no sponsorships on this podcast. I do this all in my spare time for free for you. So any little bit goes a long way. Appreciate all of you. All right. Let's talk CFP first. I'm going to save the SEC action for the end of the episode. I'm going to try not to go super long here, but as I said, for all the new Vol Twitter follows, and maybe some Georgia followers too over the weekend, who just want to see me eat crow. It doesn't matter. I appreciate you all being here as well. So let's talk a little bit of CFP first. And what I think we might see happen tonight following kind of the action of the weekend. So this is not an SEC specific rundown. This is going to be more of a college football playoff specific rundown. So this is coming from NCAA's website, just kind of their projections. These are not last week's. Okay. These are projections possibly for what we could see tonight when those rankings come out. Right. So let's just kind of start at the top, and we're looking for those top 4 teams that are going to get buys. Okay. Oregon still kind of hanging out there at the top. They did have a close game versus Wisconsin. Just kind of escaped that one with the win. Didn't look great, but they're still undefeated. I don't think the committee is going to move Oregon out of that one spot at all. And then we're looking for what are those other top ranked conference champions, right? Texas kind of played a close one on the road at Arkansas, but they're still probably going to remain the highest ranked SEC team. They do just have one loss. They're 9-1 on the season. I don't see a strong rationale for why the committee would jump, say, Georgia over Texas, even though Georgia does have the head-to-head. They're a two-loss team. The game versus Tennessee, which we'll talk about later. I'm sure that's why many of you are here. I don't know that performance at home over Tennessee is going to catapult them over Texas, but we shall see. It's just one man's opinion, right? Ohio State, Penn State, like as far as the rankings are concerned, right? The tournament is not seeded. The playoff is not seeded in the order of the rankings. If it were, this would all look very different. And I'll save that little gem for the end because I tweeted out what that might look like if we were just seeding the tournament based on power ranking. So your top four highest ranked conference champions: Oregon out of the Big Ten, Texas out of the SEC, Miami for the ACC, and probably still BYU for the Big 12. They did lose. Let's see, who did they lose to? Just head up here. Shoot, sorry. Now I'm having to go back and find it here. I thought I had it pulled up, guys. I apologize. Big 10. Well, I'm not finding it. Sorry. I should know better. I'm just going to keep powering on. But the Cougars are 9-1. They'll probably stay above Boise. They do have that win over SMU. Boise, I think, will be right there, though. Like, we could be looking at a BYU 12, Boise 13 scenario. Boise State losing to Oregon is it's Kansas. It was Kansas. Sorry, guys. Kansas beat BYU. Whew. That was going to drive me crazy. That is a better loss, like losing to Oregon versus losing to Kansas. But Boise State really does not have a ranked win. Like, it might have been Washington State, but I think now that is Washington State probably no longer ranked. So both of those teams 9-1. I think it's still probably going to be BYU to get that first round bye. What this means, though, Miami, probably the only team out of the ACC getting into the playoff. Likewise, I think they might let Boise State into, but BYU very well could be the only team out of the Big 12. That does open up the possibility for one more SEC team or one more Big 10 team, pending on what Indiana, Ohio State looks like maybe this weekend. So let's talk rankings real quick, and then I'll get back more into this like seeding this playoff bracket, right? I mean, it's up here on the screen. You guys can see it. So I'm just going to kind of talk around it. What the committee's probably going to do is keep Oregon 1, Ohio State 2, Texas 3, and Penn State 4. Now, Penn State 9-1. Are they really the fourth best team in the country? You can make an argument that they're not, but based on what we've seen the committee do, they're not going to punish you really for not losing. So I think we see that. We also probably see a 10-0 Indiana, maybe at that 5 or 6 spot, probably 5. I mean, they had a bye. I don't think we're going to see the committee drop a top 10 team for not losing or not playing during a bye week, right? So then that brings you Notre Dame, Miami, Georgia at that 6, 7, 8. It seems logical to me that Georgia will definitely jump Tennessee. I'm interested as far as what they do with Alabama, but Alabama beating Mercer at home, not as big of a win as Georgia beating Tennessee, though Alabama does have the head-to-head. Georgia now has ranked wins over Texas and over Tennessee. Alabama just has the ranked win over Georgia. So I think that is strong enough to bump Georgia ahead of Tennessee. I don't know that it'll move Georgia all the way to the 6th spot, but it could. So what we probably will see is a Notre Dame 6, moving up after BYU and Tennessee lost, and then Miami, a single loss team, probably at the 7. Even though I do think Georgia is better than Miami, I think we'll see like Notre Dame 6, Miami 7, Georgia 8. Now, here's where it gets really interesting. You have Tennessee, Alabama, Ole Miss, all out of the SEC, all 2-loss teams. Okay. Tennessee was number 7 last week. Alabama was number 10 last week, and Ole Miss was number 11. Ole Miss had a bye week, but it's technically still out of probably the playoff rankings as of right now. What it's really going to come down to is whether the committee thinks that Tennessee's loss on the road at Arkansas is a better loss than Ole Miss losing to an unranked Kentucky at home, like Kentucky with a losing record, right? What you have to look at then is wins. Well, Tennessee lost to Georgia. Ole Miss beat Georgia. But Tennessee also beat Alabama head to head. So Ole Miss gets a home win over Georgia. Tennessee gets a home win over Alabama. Who does the committee think the better team is there between Alabama and Georgia? Alabama obviously has the home win over Georgia. You would think with that circular logic there that Tennessee should be ranked above Alabama. That's also what we thought 2 years ago when Tennessee had the head over Alabama and the committee still ranked Alabama ahead of the Vols. Seems like Tennessee's probably on a path to get screwed here. I don't agree with it. I think Georgia should jump Tennessee, but I think Tennessee should stay in the 9 spot with Alabama staying at the 10, Ole Miss at the 11, which would then put BYU 12 and probably Boise coming in there at number 13. So Ole Miss, even though they're ranked above BYU, Boise, you're not going to get 5 teams from the SEC into the tournament. It's looking like you'll probably get Texas, Georgia, Tennessee, Alabama. Now, that could completely flip-flop if the committee decides that Ole Miss is the better team than Tennessee based on the win over Georgia, which I think is entirely probable. I think that's what we're going to see tonight, actually. And instead, you see Ole Miss getting seeded 9th and Tennessee being that bubble team, kind of that first SEC team out. So that brings us into this bracket here where you'll see Oregon, Texas, Miami, BYU getting the bye, and then Ohio State as the second team out of the Big Ten. These are rankings, right? As the second team out of the Big Ten going up probably against Boise. You'll see Penn State out of the Big Ten, probably getting Alabama. I think right now the way to look tonight, this will probably be Indiana and Ole Miss, if I just had to put money on it, and then Notre Dame, Georgia. So, we can go through what we think the rankings are going to be after that: SMU, A&M, Colorado, South Carolina. Most of those bubble teams, like South Carolina being there, maybe kind of around like 16, 17, 18, 7-3. I just don't think South Carolina at 9-3 is going to be consequential to the college football playoff. They're playing as well as anybody, especially in the SEC right now. But I still don't think they're going to be on that bubble in the playoff discussion. As far as the SEC teams, I think it's either going to be Ole Miss or Tennessee left out. For sure being in likely Texas, Georgia, and then Alabama based solely on that brand. Not what I think should happen, just what I think is probable for what we see tonight, y'all. So let's move on now and talk a little SEC. I'm going to go back to some old school stuff that we used to put up in earlier episodes, okay? Looking at offensive and defensive efficiencies, comparing what we saw out of the SEC in week 12 to the conference averages. Underperformers and overperformers. I think that's the most important stuff to kind of glean from these efficiency charts. By the way, If you're new to these, I post these every week, even though I haven't done an episode in the last couple of weeks. These are always posted on my website, secrecap.com/stats. And I always post them in my Twitter on typically on Sundays, sometimes Mondays, if I'm running behind. And I also do like the full season averages as well. But now that we've got several games of conference play and we're really trying to get into like what the SEC championship is going to look like, I like to compare each weekly performance for the teams that play to the conference averages. Are they underperforming or overperforming relative to where they have been? And so the averages, these red and blue lines, are going to change a little bit for the weekly versus the season average for conference play. But what you want to look at is relative to each team, where do they stand in their offensive and defensive efficiency? So the lower right-hand quadrant here is going to be better. Like that's where you want to be defensively and offensively. So you want to be as far to the right on that x-axis as possible and as far down on that y-axis, because defensive efficiency is negative. That means you're limiting opposing offensive efficiency. A lot of people flip that because people like to see things trend up and to the right. I leave it alone. So down and to the right is very, very good. That's where you want to be. And so offensively and defensively, you've got some teams playing really well here on the season: Ole Miss, Alabama, Texas. And then coming into the stretch in conference play, you've got some teams that are playing really well as also. South Carolina stands out. Texas A&M stands out. Arkansas just can't seem to catch a break, but then Georgia kind of on the bubble there as well. Teams that are kind of falling out of that, Tennessee, notably in conference play, has underperformed, even though they did beat Alabama. They did beat Florida in a close game at home. Oklahoma on the road. Oklahoma's not a good team. Tennessee at home as well. Lost to Georgia on the road. They won versus Mississippi State at home. They do play on the road at Vanderbilt. So Tennessee kind of sliding out there, but South Carolina moving in, Texas A&M moving in. And let's compare that to these Week 12 performances. Like notable underperformances here defensively, Tennessee. We have talked all season about that defense, and it underperformed. It underperformed versus where Georgia has been offensively. Like Georgia outperformed a good bit offensively. So like credit to the Bulldogs there. They performed better. But Tennessee, relative to where they are defensively, played much, much worse. Whereas the offense stayed the same. Like offense has kind of been around 0.12, 0.14, whatever. That offense played about the same on the road. So credit to that offense for being consistent, but they've been kind of consistently subpar. Whereas Georgia offensively played just better, like relative to what they needed to be. And then defensively, Georgia was also about the same. Like Georgia really didn't play much better defensively, but they had the offensive performance that they needed to kind of handle business there. A&M, I'm not going to really talk about the teams that like played cupcakes this weekend, like the teams that played ULM and all that. Really focus on the SEC matchups. So that's why you see like A&M, Alabama, UK all down here in that bottom right. South Carolina, Missouri, notable, like Missouri's defense kind of underperforming. South Carolina's defense sort of underperforming relative to where they have been as well, but seeing some really good offense out of those two teams on the weekend. And then notably Florida LSU, right? And I've been banging this drum on Florida LSU for multiple weeks now. I said LSU efficiency-wise is not playing like a one-loss team. They're playing like a 3 or 4 loss team. And we have finally seen that catch up to them. You look at that efficiency rating there versus Florida, they were way below their averages offensively and defensively. And talk about another team who's playing pretty good coming down the stretch here, Florida Gators. Ole Miss goes on the road to play Florida this weekend. Now, Ole Miss is like a 10 or 11 point favorite. I'm not picking Florida to win that game, but that could be really interesting. Another game that could be interesting, Texas A&M going to Auburn. Texas A&M going to Auburn. Let me maximize this one more time and kind of show you what we're looking at. So Texas A&M offensively playing much better than Auburn, but Auburn's defense, this has been the one that has just been utterly confounding, is Auburn playing really good defense and just not being able to come away with games. Really, truly kind of uh, flabbergasted, flabbergasted at that one. Auburn should have a much better record than they do, but they don't. They just seemingly find a way to give those games away when they shouldn't. So A&M is like a 2.5-point favorite on the road at Auburn. Watch out for that one. I'm just saying, watch out for that one. Based on this, that could be really, really interesting. Really, really interesting. Okay. I guess that kind of like summarizes my thoughts. Let me get into the action over the weekend, particularly from the Tennessee Georgia game, which is probably why many of you may be tuning in to watch this eventually. Not necessarily live right now, but catching it on the channel later when I post this. I tweeted out during the game, the Tennessee Georgia game, Saturday night, that Tennessee was getting rinsed by the officials. The Tennessee was getting rinsed by the officials. And I had a lot of people chime in. I didn't think anything about it. I was just kind of tweeting my feelings. It's what I felt in the moment. It's what I was watching, right? And I'm not going to go through and necessarily rehash like every single call. We'll talk about a couple. And that tweet caught on Vol Twitter pretty quickly. It didn't take but about like 15, 20 minutes. And that caught a lot of likes, a lot of retweets, and a lot of comments as well, both from, I think, Tennessee fans and Georgia fans as well. And so I want to clarify like the context of my thoughts around that. So what I was watching in the moment was a lot of calls in the game really kind of hurting Tennessee, hurting their momentum, and favoring Georgia, kind of helping Georgia extend drives. And so I just said Tennessee is getting rinsed or hosed. I can't remember the exact word, either rinsed or hosed by the officials. What I didn't say, guys, and I want to be very clear about this for the kibble brains out there who piped into the comments and were like, "Oh yeah, just blame the refs. Tennessee's had drops and, this and that, but yeah, sure, blame the refs." I didn't blame the refs, okay? I wasn't blaming the refs. Go back and read all of those tweets. Find me a tweet where I blamed the outcome of the game on the refs. I didn't do that. What I said was Tennessee is getting rinsed by the officials. And that's exactly what was happening, okay? That is exactly what was happening. So a lot of people said, "Oh yeah, sure. Go back and look at, all the drop passes and blame it on the officials." "Oh, sure. Yeah, like it's totally fine when it, happens to Alabama and Neyland, but sure, it's the officials' fault when you're playing on the road at Georgia." No, 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 no. Kibble brains. Listen up. Listen to me. I wasn't blaming the outcome of the game on the refs. I was merely stating something that a lot of people watching the game also felt. Non-partisans, if you will, non-Tennessee, non-Georgian partisans going, "Man, nobody could win a game versus Georgia with these calls," right? The face mask that wasn't a face mask. I understand why they called it a face mask. I understand 100% why they called that a face mask. But we have instant replay, and it wasn't a face mask. The Squirrel White catch where he controls the ball all the way through the ground, comes down with it, and then the ball bounces out. And they review it. They review it to overturn the fact that it was a catch. Let's follow that up with an Oscar Delp catch where he catches the ball, secures it, turns, takes 2 steps, and the ball comes out. It's fumbled. Tennessee recovers, and it's ruled a fumble. They never reviewed it. Why did you set the precedent of reviewing a contested or close, a close call that was a catch and overturned it, and you don't even take the time to review a similar play, like, in a subsequent quarter on a subsequent drive? The 12th man on the field call, which they let the play happen, and then it felt like it was 4 or 5 minutes later, they're reviewing that for a 12th man on the field goal. Well, that flag should have been thrown immediately. How were they reviewing it after the play, right? Inconsistency. I understand why they ruled that 12th man call. I do. I get it. I agree with it. but it was a mess the way it was happening. Okay. The hit basically on, I think it was either Dante Thornton or Chris Brazzell before the ball ever got to him. That was clearly pass interference. That was not ruled pass interference. Okay. I, I'm just saying these were all obvious things to viewers in the moment. They were obvious to me. That's why I tweeted out, dude, Tennessee is getting hosed by these calls. And yes, did Tennessee's offensive line hold? Yes. Did Georgia's offensive line hold? Yes. There's a clip of James Pierce getting body slammed. Okay. There's a lot of holding calls that go uncalled. Okay. You'll find them in every game. Those aren't the calls I'm talking about. I'm talking about those big momentum swinging, drive changing calls where that face mask instead of it being third and like 5 or maybe third and 4 or whatever it was going to be, you move the sticks on that call. Like that's a momentum swinging play. I'm not saying that the officiating in those calls cost Tennessee the game. And that's the reason they lost the game. Never in any one of my statements did I say that. Kibble brains. Okay. So go back and read it and reread it with context. What I said was Tennessee was getting screwed over, and they were. I never picked Tennessee to win that game on the road. I didn't. In my preview that I do based on efficiencies, it's a quick thread. Go back, you'll find it. I said asking Tennessee's offense to win that game on the road in Athens at night is a tall order. The defense was going to have to hold up to keep Georgia from blowing it wide open. And they did that for a half, but they couldn't do it in the second half. And so Tennessee's offense really didn't have a chance in that second half at winning that ball game because the defense couldn't hold up. The really solid defense that's kind of come through for them all year just couldn't hold up. That's the reason, guys. That's the reason they lost the game. Okay. Was it the officiating? So I never said that it was the officiating. I never said that. But it didn't help. It doesn't help when you have to beat the team that you're playing and the officials who just aren't going to let anything go your way, right? But that's college football. And I think that was my point. Look back to the LSU South Carolina game, right? South Carolina fans furious. Was it the officiating that lost them the game? No. But it didn't help. And while we're on the topic, let's talk about when Georgia went on the road to Austin to play Texas. Now, it's not as big of a deal because Georgia won that game. So when you win, it's great. When you win, it's not a big deal, right? But that pass interference call on the interception, the interception that was overturned because of pass interference, I should say, defensive pass interference, where the Texas student section got so furious they threw trash in the end zone. Officials take like 5 or 10 minutes to then overturn a pass interference call that gives Texas the ball on the interception. That should have never happened, right? Georgia fans were not happy about that. Now, it doesn't matter because you ended up winning the game. That wasn't the reason you won the game. It wasn't the reason you lost the game. But imagine if you had lost the game. Imagine if you had lost that game. You would come back to that play and you would go, they should have never given Texas that interception in their own territory due to the DPI, the pass interference call. It swings depending on what side you're on. When you're the home team and you're winning, why would you care, right? Why would you care? Of course, you're going to say that the other team is blaming the officials. But when you're on the receiving end, I'm sure Alabama fans at Tennessee did not like the officiating. Was it the reason they lost? No. But did it help them? No. When Tennessee's on the road in Athens at night, was the officiating the reason they lost? No. But did it help them? Hell no. Did overturning that defensive pass interference help Georgia in that moment? Hell no. And if they had lost, they would be pissed about it. Texas fans would be happy, right? So I posted a tweet after all of that, kind of saying that the SEC as a conference deserves better. And it's true. Every team in the SEC deserves better. When you're on the winning side, you could give a fuck, right? You could give a fuck. Why would you care? You won. Doesn't matter. But when you're on the losing end, it hurts. It stings. Gives you something to talk about. You can't blame it but you do recognize that it has to be better. So all I'm saying is at some point, every team in the conference is going to be on the receiving end. Probably every team in the conference has been on the receiving end at some point this season. Georgia's been there. Bama's been there. Tennessee's been there. South Carolina's been there. You name it, right? Every team's been there. So all I'm saying is it's got to be better because it's going to work out for you sometimes, but it's going to work against you sometimes too. There's millions of dollars on the line every week in the SEC and in college football. And either the SEC has to take accountability or officials need to suffer consequences. We have instant replay. Everybody can see it from the comfort of their living room on their own 4K television, as clear as day from 22 camera angles. There's no reason to be getting this wrong. There's no reason we should be getting this wrong. Guys, if you're here from Vol Twitter for all that action over the weekend, I do want to say, hey, thank you. I love Tennessee, man. I love Tennessee. I love Tennessee fans. I love how crazy Vol Twitter is. So I appreciate the retweets, the likes, and the follows from a lot of you guys. Like I said, if you've made it over here on the channel, hit the like, hit the subscribe button, share it with your friends. I talk Tennessee ball a lot. I've even got Josh Heupel with me here in the room right now, huh? How's that for you guys? Just a little Tennessee homerism, just seeing the world through my orange tinted shades to go out with on this episode of the SEC Recap Podcast. Guys, thank you so much for being here. I'll be back with you next week. We got a jam-packed Week 13 slate. Big games. Guess what? Tennessee's not out of it. Tennessee could still be in it. We'll see what happens on those CFP rankings tonight. We'll watch the action this weekend, and I will be here to recap it all for you guys next week. Appreciate everything. Thank you for tuning in here on the SEC Recap Podcast. Have a good one. Peace.